I know. They are not necessarily the free agency splashes that Cowboys fans want, but these have been pretty savvy moves from the Cowboys. And tonight we'll talk about it and we'll discuss if the Cowboys maybe, potentially, might have just nailed the Tyron Smith decision. We'll talk about it. We'll break it down. Here we go. What is up, everyone, and welcome into ATC Sports Dallas Primetime. I am your host, Mauricio Rodriguez, streaming with you live every Sunday through Thursday night at 8 p.m. Central here on Dallas On Demand Sports Talk Network. With a lot more content coming your way, make sure that you check out atzsports.com/Dallas. And as always, do me a favor and hit the like button for me if you enjoy the show. Welcome, everyone, on a Thursday night. It is a great night to talk some Cowboys football. And, it is also a busier night to talk some Cowboys football because the Cowboys didn't make one move, right? Which is what they were averaging over the last couple of days. First, they got Trent Sieg on board, then they got Eric Kendricks, and now they've also gotten Jordan Lewis back on the team, and also CJ Goodwin. So tonight we'll talk about that. I think that the big news is Jordan Lewis, though. We'll talk about it. And towards the end of the show, I want to revisit the Tyron Smith situation because evidently 4 days into free agency, I think it's worth doing so, specifically because Stephen Jones had some stuff to say today. And when Stephen Jones talks, we complain, of course, but we also listen just to try to figure out what the team is thinking and where they are at in several instances. Now, Katharina starts us off with a very interesting comment here. Because Katharina says over on YouTube, it's starting to look up, Mo. And I'll say this. Yes and no. Because on the one hand, sure, I think bringing back Jordan Lewis should be celebrated. I think it's a good move, and I'll get into why in a little bit. And I think, signing Eric Kendricks was also smart. I really liked it. And as I said yesterday, like that was a move that I was calling for before free agency began. So, hey, they made it happen. I need to be objective and be like, that's a good move, right? However, it's also like, that point of the year in which they start making moves because they don't like to do anything in wave one of free agency. Hell, not even in wave two, really. And then they start getting busy. And it's not like they're going to field a roster that is not made up of 90 players in the offseason and 53 in the regular season. So at some point, they're going to get busy. But it's about, being fair with every single decision that they make. We can take a look, in their own words, we can take a holistic view at their offseason and criticize it and complain about it. But if we're breaking down move by move, CJ Goodwin is a good move to bring him back. Same goes for Jordan Lewis. So that is where I am at right now. But anyways, let's get us started. Shout out to everyone, by the way, here in the chat. Shout out to Gregory. We've got, I saw Toxic Tom in there. Hadn't seen Toxic in a good while. We've got Gregory, Mark Aaron. We've got Marcus, who says, we need a nice special teams replacement for Dorrance Armstrong. I'm somewhat confident in the Cowboys basically replacing several weapons from special teams just because the Cowboys really went through a huge transition in 2024, right? Where they were trying to replace Gifford last year, and they also lost CJ Goodwin early on. They lost DeMarvin Overshown, who was likely trending towards a big special teams role. And they did took a step backward, in my opinion. The Cowboys did on special teams. But bringing back CJ Goodwin is going to go a long way, in my opinion, in that department. And overall, I do trust Bones to get that job done, right? As a special teams coordinator. I know he's got some flaws, but overall, I do think he's done a good job with the Cowboys special teams. There's, players that have carved out bigger roles as of late. You've got Sam Williams contributing on special teams and doing all sorts of stuff. You've got Hunter Lipke carving out a role in there. I'm not sure we should be expecting Sean McKeon to be back, but Sean McKeon, when he does play, He also earned a role, and I don't think Sean McKeon will be back, though. Like, that would be my educated guess as of today. But obviously, with those players, you never know. But let's get into Jordan Lewis first. Let's break down the Jordan Lewis signing. It's a 1-year deal, and it's one of those deals. Man, I forget the actual like wording that they used. It's a 4-year qualifying contract, which basically means that you're paying a veteran who's been on your team for 4 years in a row. You're paying him X amount of money. In this case, it's somewhere around $2.8 million, but the cap hit is much lower. Not because you're adding voidable years into the contract, but because that player under those circumstances has that benefit, like that veteran salary benefit, that where the cap hit is lower than what he's actually receiving. In other words, the Cowboys make this happen probably in large part because they like that benefit, that financial benefit to it, where it makes sense to them. Similar to the Eric Kendrick signing, a big part of it might have been the fact that he doesn't factor into the compensatory pick formula because he was cut. His contract didn't expire with the Chargers. He was cut by the Chargers and thus doesn't factor into the formula because it's not a player that the Chargers are losing to free agency. They decided to cut him. So you got to look at these financial and salary cap implications for players with the way that the Cowboys operate and the way that they like to preach about the salary cap. These things are important because they tell us about what they think and how they go about things in free agency. And I think they matter when you're looking at somebody like Stephon Gilmore and wondering if they'll be back or not, right? Because maybe he doesn't fit into that, compensatory pick. Like he does fit into it, and it would affect the Cowboys if they bring him back in the formula. And he also cannot be signed for the kind of contract that Jordan Lewis signed. So I think those are important details to put out there. That being said, though, by itself, football move, talking about Jordan Lewis coming back to Dallas, I really like it. Let me know in the chat. Do you like or dislike the Cowboys move to bring back Jordan Lewis? Because to me, it is a strong response. I do like it a lot. Here's why I like Jordan Lewis. He's undeniably, if you were to play a game right now, your starter at nickel, because you would have Dayron Bland on the outside, Trevon Diggs on the opposite side, and Jordan Lewis, playing on the inside. He's been very good among 75 cornerbacks with the most snaps this year. He was 13th in missed tackle percentage. He had the 13th lowest missed tackle percentage. And that's a huge part of being a nickel cornerback. I do think it's one of the most difficult positions in the sport. I do think you got to have somebody that can be a factor in the running game and can be someone that comes downhill pretty quickly and lays the boom. And I think that's the kind of guy that Jordan Lewis is, while not being a liability in coverage. Is he elite in coverage? Is he a lockdown nickel cornerback? First and foremost, I don't think that exists in the league today with the way that slot wide receivers act right now. Like they obviously have the advantage for many reasons. You don't have to be perfect in coverage, but Jordan Lewis is not a liability. Plus, he's a great tackler. Plus, he can be physical. That's what you need in a nickel cornerback. Is he going to be a Pro Bowler? Is he going to be named All Pro? No, but you don't really need that with Jordan Lewis. He's cheap. He's inexpensive. You bring him back, and suddenly the floor for your cornerback position is much better than it was basically yesterday, right before you re-signed him. Now, if you bring back Stephon Gilmore, it would be made an even better move because suddenly we're not discussing Jordan Lewis, a starter. We are discussing Jordan Lewis, the backup. And that would be ideal, of course, because that would mean your cornerback depth is at a very good spot. And specifically with the Cowboys, it is a major advantage that they have Dayron Bland. And I say that because in many other teams, you need to have depth for the outside corner, but you also need to have depth for the nickel cornerback because, again, they play like different positions. They're not exactly the same. They have the same meeting room. They have the same drills, but Nickelbacks played differently. But when you have somebody like Daron Bland who can do a little bit of both, that means that if one of the outside guys goes down, Daron Bland kicks outside and Jordan Lewis takes over the slot. And if Daron Bland goes down, then it's Jordan Lewis. It's a direct switch. So I really like the idea of Jordan Lewis being the fourth cornerback, no matter who goes down. But to get to that point, you got to bring back Stephon Gilmore because you're starting cornerback trio like that would look Gilmore and Diggs on the outside with Daron Bland on the inside and Lewis on the bench. That would be the ideal setup for the Cowboys in this year's free agency. But you got to bring back Stephon Gilmore to make that happen, obviously. Toxic Tom says, rather have Bland on the boundaries, especially with his interception abilities. I'm not sure where I fall on that conversation, but that's a good debate to have because I understand Toxic's point right there, but I'll say this, I would much rather have Trevon Diggs, Daron Bland, Jordan Lewis. Excuse me. I would much rather have Trevon Diggs, Gilmore, Bland than I would have Bland, Diggs, and Lewis. I would much rather have the Gilmore option where I've got Daron Bland playing on the inside. And I'll say this too. I think we've seen the best football from Daron Bland on the inside. I do believe that's where he plays his best football. Because I know, and I'm not going to try and act like Daron Bland had a pick six or he was cooked, because I think that's an exaggeration. But I do think that the interceptions were pretty much what made him so awesome on the outside. He was very good beyond the picks, but I do think he was better inside. So I definitely would bet for that one, for that option first. And now Toxic says, I am not banking on Diggs until he's actually playing. That is fair. On that scenario, though, we would be on the same page about bringing back Stephon Gilmore because you would absolutely need that if that is the case. Let's see here. What do you guys have to say about Lewis? Tom says Lewis was a great signing, no doubt, but I'm pretty sure that means by Gilmore. Could be the case, but of course, him signing essentially a minimum deal could help out for the Cowboys to be convinced of bringing back Gilmore. I'm not sure if they're going to do it, though. Hope they bring back Gilmore, says Bruce. Let's see here. Ty says, I want Daron Bland back inside. I'm with you there. I know it's a tough debate, but I would much rather have Daron Bland playing at nickel for sure. TC says, I like the Lewis signing, though. To be honest, I still want another starting caliber cornerback to step in case of another injury. Terry says, my issue is we didn't get a running back during free agency. Is Jerry all-in like he said? Definitely not, to the latter part of that question. And yeah, I do agree that we're now at a point where, and A.J. Dillon, by the way, has signed with the Packers, one of the very few free agents that has been linked to Dallas in this process, now off the board because he went to Green Bay. He's rejoining them. And now we wonder, is it J.K. Dobbins or nothing for the Cowboys at this point? And J.K. Dobbins, we've talked about him on the show. He's somebody that has dealt with so many injuries. I feel like we don't really know who he is, but he does fit that bill that the Cowboys like of an injured player who's going to be chipped, but who has a ton of upside because he's talented and he has had a tremendous season before. And that would be what the Cowboys would be banking on if they do pick J.K. Dobbins in free agency. As Marcus says, though, that would be a thrift shopping. Basically, that's bargain bin shopping. And that's the route that they're going to take. While also, as Isidro points out here, they're going to take somebody in the draft. The thing is, though, you don't want to get to the draft with so many needs. As Jello says, bring Dalvin Cook. I know Dalvin Cook is getting some hype because he's been active on Cowboys Twitter. I'm not sure Dalvin Cook is who we think he is, though. I was hopeful the Cowboys got him midseason last year, and then they didn't. And then Dalvin Cook basically didn't deliver on the New York Jets either. So I'm not sure how to feel about Dalvin Cook. I'm not gonna get excited about that one at all. Tom says, I was reading about Cook. Is there any truth to that? So what happened is Dalvin Cook went crazy on Twitter, and he started following a ton of Cowboys content creators. He started liking Cowboys related content. He liked, for example, the Eric Kendricks report from Michael Gelkin. So that's where the chatter began about Dalvin Cook, where suddenly he was a member of Cowboys Nation out of nowhere on his social media. And that caught people's attention. Toxic Tom says, Mo, you played running back, right? Toxic, are you suggesting something? Are you suggesting signing a shorter running back than Deuce Vaughn? Can you imagine that running back room? Deuce and me, and I'm shorter than Deuce. They wouldn't see us. Front sevens would tremble in fear. Not a bad idea. Plus, I'll take the money. I'll take the minimum money. I won't bother the Cowboys front office. Stephen Jones will be happy to have me. There's a lot of upside, right? There's a lot of upside. But anyways, all kidding aside, though, I think the Jordan Lewis move is great. I like it. It's smart. It's going to get a positive grade from me. And the Cowboys also got a little bit busy on special teams today. They re-signed CJ Goodwin. It's a one-year deal as well. And CJ Goodwin was one that I was very intrigued about, because even though we know Dallas likes him a lot, and specifically John Fassel, for example, likes him a lot, it made sense to bring him back. But I wondered, just because of the pectoral injury issue, it was early in the season. It was September when he suffered a season-ending injury. And I really wondered what was the Cowboys thinking on that, especially as they get younger and younger in their special teams core. But I love Goodwin being back. Shout out to Aisha Morrison. She mentioned this on Twitter, and I think all of us agree with her. The Cowboys took a step backwards, specifically in coverage on special teams. There was a lot of things that remained pretty much the same, I think, but coverage was an issue. There were several instances in the 2023 season when we were like, who should make that tackle, right? Like, they were missing tackles on special teams, and that was an uncharacteristic aspect of the Cowboys special teams last year. I think bringing back CJ Goodwin pretty much takes care of that, because CJ has always been so consistent on special teams. It's obviously one of those players that we always like. We know he's a cornerback, but he's not going to play cornerback. He's literally a specialist, and I don't mind having that on the roster. And it is clear that the current Cowboys coaching staff doesn't mind either, because they have kept CJ Goodwin in that capacity for a long time. I do like it. I do like having real specialists. It's a challenge to go into a preseason and have to build a 53-man roster where you're carrying Kevontae Turpin and CJ Goodwin. When you're carrying like these very specific specialist players, but the Cowboys have made it work in previous years, and I would be surprised if they don't do it again. So I think bringing back CJ Goodwin essentially confirms it that they're gonna go down that route again. Bruce says Mo and Deuce Vaughn could run the Lollipop Guild package. There you go. We even have a name now for the unit. We're gonna be like the new Legion of Boom. We're gonna go down in history. It's gonna be awesome, and I'm gonna get it back too. Terry says we need to get a bell cow running back. Enough of the Pollard type running backs. Draft a wide receiver to complement CD. And I think that's why people liked the idea of AJ Dillon, right? Like, not a cowbell type running back in the sense that he wouldn't have been a three-down back. That's clear. But he would have been like this power back, while the Cowboys could have maybe drafted somebody that was more of the 1-2 punch combination there for Dallas. I think they're going to go down balanced. I also think you don't want an old school running back in this game. It's changed. You need a more dynamic guy, but you probably want somebody that's balanced for sure. And if you can get a 1-2 punch, even better. Let's see here. Let's move on a little bit here on the show. I also wanted to discuss, because now, man, we're at this point where we're like, okay, now what? The Cowboys have gotten Eric Kendricks. The linebacker market is pretty much wiped out. Devin White signed with the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm not sure we wanted Devin White, I'm not sure any Cowboys fan was pounding the table for White. I had a friend joke with me that we were workshopping a headline for A to Z Sports, and I sent, something along the lines that Eagles signed former Super Bowl champion to fix pressing need. And I had a friend shoot back this suggestion in return. Eagles continue to have pressing need after signing Super Bowl champion. And yeah, I feel like Devin White wouldn't have moved the needle, but the Cowboys are running out of additional linebacker options other than Eric Kendricks, and I'm not fine with it, but I'm not surprised by it either. So I think now the big questions about the Cowboys free agency is, are they going to bring back Stephon Gilmore? Are they going to bring back Tyron Smith? I think those are the two big questions. I know people are also talking about Jonathan Hankins on Twitter. I'm pretty optimistic. I'm not very optimistic about this offseason in general, but I am optimistic about the Cowboys' prospects of bringing Hankins back because he does fit that minimum deal type, bill. Like, he is going to sign for little money, so I'm not worried about the Cowboys not pulling the trigger on that one. Last year, they re-signed Jonathan Hankins at the end of March, so it was March 31st. So I don't think we're in a rush for Jonathan Hankins at all. But with Smith and Gilmore, the situation is more complicated. I talked about Gilmore already. Pretty much I'm skeptical. I think he's going to get solid money, and I think it's different with Dallas and Jordan Lewis because of the type of contract that he's going to get. It's not going to be a salary cap friendly one like Lewis is. And I also think, the comp pick formula will matter in this decision for the Cowboys. I'm not saying any of it is right. I'm not saying they should be doing it this way. I'm just going off of how they usually operate. So I wouldn't put money on Stephon Gilmore returning. If he does return, it probably is because the market is lower for him out there than expected. Now, regarding Tyron Smith, he falls on a similar category. Let's hear what Stephen Jones had to say about Tyron Smith before we begin. So he was asked, and by the way, it's so hilarious to me hilarious in a sad way that Stephen Jones is out there taking questions from reporters because he attended a promotional event where Kid Rock was present and Stephen Jones was present, because it seems to me like football is the hobby of the de facto general manager of the Cowboys. Like, he's out there promoting events while NFL teams are getting busy and calling free agents. Not the Cowboys. Like, Stephen Jones will pick up if somebody calls him, but it's his hobby. It's his he's busy promoting events. But anyways, I think that's life in the Dallas Cowboys. But let's hear to what Stephen Jones had to say about Tyron Smith.
Open. No one thinks more. Tyron Smith's going to be a Hall of Fame football player, and has had an amazing career, and we certainly hadn't shut the door on a continued career here in Dallas. But he's a man's man. He's one of the great left tackles to ever play the game. And no one's feels better about Tyron Smith than this organization, whether it be Jerry, whether it be myself, the coaching staff, Will McClay. I have nothing but big-time thoughts about Tyron and what he's all about.
This comment is killing me, man. Why is his collar popped? God damn. Oh, I hadn't even noticed that.
Open. No one thinks more. Tyron Smith's going to be a Hall of Fame football player.
I had to play it again for those of you who missed it. Damn, man, that was good. I hadn't noticed that, Toxic, actually. And I've laughed at the pictures. I've used the interviews for articles and all that today. First time I noticed that. But yeah, Tyron Smith, as Stephen Jones said, they haven't closed the door on him. Who knows what that means? I'm going to say this. Obviously, Stephen Jones was not going to reply to reporters like, oh no, we don't want Tyron Smith. He's done. Like, he was never going to say any of that. So I think his response is just about what you would have expected. And I think if you were to ask me, is it something or nothing that Tyron Smith has yet to sign with any team, I would say probably closer to nothing. Like, right now, the question we should be asking ourselves is, did the Cowboys nail this decision in the sense that they allowed Tyron Smith to go out there and test the waters of free agency, only for him to find out that there are no teams lining up for his services? Right now, 4 days into free agency, that is what we are asking ourselves. Did the Cowboys nail this decision in the sense that Tyron Smith is going to come back and he's going to be like, all right, I'll do an incentive-based deal? And we don't know the answer to that question. We can speculate on it, but the reality is we don't know. What I will say is this: it's not the first time that a market at a specific position where supply is very limited, and at offensive tackle, you're looking at very few options, which is why Tyron Smith is perceived as the top tackle in this free agency class. I think we're at a spot where it's slowed down because everybody is waiting on somebody to sign. Like, all of these tackles are like, we don't want to set the price because we don't want to mess it up, basically. As much as I know the injuries are a factor, as much as I know his health is a factor, I just don't believe that he doesn't have offers on the table. I think teams are absolutely looking into Tyron Smith more than anything, because not every team operates like the Cowboys, where they don't get voidable years on contracts to just, I know the Cowboys do have that in several deals that you have to, but I'm talking about a contending team being willing to pay money to Tyron Smith, knowing that, hey, we might lose him midway through the year, but I'll take the risk. I think there's at least one team out there with that mindset. And again, this is just me speculating, not any sort of inside info at all. But I would be surprised if there are no teams out there putting offers on the table for Tyron Smith, offers that are better than Dallas. But at the same time, I do understand that this whole thing taking time is giving us some hope, because what if the Cowboys nailed it? What if the Cowboys actually knew that he was not going to get the deal that he was looking for, even though Tyron Smith was projected to get that sort of deal by several media websites, including PFF and A-to-Z Sports? What if they nailed it and Tyron comes back and they do get him locked up? We'll see, because, the initial report about them not being likely to come together in 2024, that's a report that comes out of an Indianapolis meeting where the two sides figured out, oh, we're not actually close in our numbers. Like, Tyron Smith came in like this and the Cowboys came in like this, and, it's not going to work out. That's what the report was all about when it came out. But now days have gone by, free agency has kicked off, and there are teams out there that are maybe not getting Tyron Smith yet, and maybe that gives us some hope about Cowboys and Tyron Smith potentially coming together to another agreement before the 2024 season. Now, some people don't want Tyron Smith back, which I understand, but I strongly wish Tyron Smith comes back for another year. I do think that is the way. Like, if the Cowboys, somebody asked me today in a meeting over at A-to-Z Sports, like, what do you want the Cowboys to do? Because they haven't done anything. And my first response was, man, I wish they bring Tyron Smith back. I wish they do. I'm not acting like he didn't play 14 games last year at a second-team All-Pro level. I'm not acting like that. Now, I'm not saying that just because they go down that route, they forget about picking a tackle in the NFL draft, but just bring back Tyron Smith, and you have him while you have him. And when it comes to somebody like that, that alone is worth the risk. That's how I view it. So Tyron Smith, maybe they nailed it. That's what I'm holding out hope for. Maybe they nailed it. Maybe they knew what the market value was really going to be like out there, and maybe they end up together again. But I will say I'm skeptical on it. I just think it's a small moving market at this point, and it will take some time to figure out. Let's see some of your comments, though, in the chat. I had a question pending here from Katharina, who asked about Ezekiel Elliott, and I wanted to read that question pretty quickly. Do you think they will bring back Zeke? It's a good question, Katharina. Initial report from Jane Slater is that they have not called him, that they have not talked to Zeke. But I will remind you of something. Last year, Zeke ended up in New England in August. So I could see that being a slow developing situation where if the Cowboys don't add another running back and they get somebody in the NFL draft, but they still need a body, I could see Zeke being brought back. But I wouldn't put the chances at above 5. Like, I would say it's more unlikely to happen than it is likely. Isidro says Tyron at 80% is good enough for Mimo. Oh yeah, for sure. And I wanted to say this too. I've seen some people kind of suggest like, oh, you know, because he rests with the Cowboys, he's gonna prefer signing with Dallas. That is, in my opinion, a bunch of BS. It is true that the Cowboys have an advantage in knowing Tyron Smith very well and knowing his situation, knowing the ins and outs as to how the practice schedule should look like. Yes, they have an advantage in that sense. Other than that, though, a lot of veteran players don't practice, guys, in the NFL. I'm talking about a lot. Like, we're not talking about Tyron Smith being the one player out of over 1,000 in the league that doesn't practice in the week. There's a lot of players that don't practice, specifically the veterans. So I don't think that's going to be a deal breaker for Tyron when he talks to other teams. But he will want to have a similar practice schedule for sure. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that will be it for me tonight here on the show. First week of free agency is in the books, at least in the primetime schedule, because I'll see you again on Sunday night, 8 p.m. Central. And hopefully the Cowboys make some more moves over the weekend that we have to talk about on Sunday. Hopefully they make life easy on us and we talk about this stuff on Sunday. In the meantime, though, enjoy your weekend. Hit the like button for me. And I'll see you el domingo. Muchas gracias. Thank you. Bye-bye.